Well, salam alaikum, hello, and welcome to a brand new episode of Retail Remix Stories. No, but I think it's always so good to meet you, Remo. Thank you for taking time out today. I know you were at Shop Talk and we're totally tired. But we're here because we all love retail, right? And quick story, I'm from the generation where retail used to be full price sales and there wasn't discount. So discount would be an end of season sale and we would all rush to get it. But very early on, I learned that during the sale periods, your conversion happened at the cash till. So your checkout was really the moment of truth, right? And coming from India, we used to have probably 20,000 people in the store in a given day. And our job as store operations managers was to make sure that everybody moved the checkout till faster and then made their purchases and went on, right? And cut to e-commerce coming in. Between service selection and price, I think price was the first one to get ahead. But when it comes to service, I think everybody kind of underrates the value of the checkout process. And everyone, please don't get me wrong on checkout. I don't mean checkout the company only, but the process of checking out of an e-commerce channel, right? So cut to today when everybody's struggling for customer acquisition. How do you kind of enable brands to grow and scale? And there, I personally feel that your payment gateway and the payment provider you work with is like a crucial connect between customer experience and what your business is doing. Also, talking to answer some of the questions from the previous panel, right? So, Remo, you've been doing this, and I know you for probably last 8-9 years. It's wonderful to see you grow here. But you've also held the one of the most responsible. You've owned the responsibility of making sure that payments kind of scale up in the region, and you've done this work of just not just building your company, but also the ecosystem, right? So, with that context, would love to hear from you on how you see this progress grow, and how do you see the checkout experience as being key to enabling growth for brands?
Interesting question, and thanks again for the invite, and good evening, everyone. I'll attempt to answer as quick as I can because it's a very, very important, complex topic. And I think if we do a step back, and you say conversion is really important. All of you that you're running a website, whatever products you're selling, people browse your products, they find the right size, color, execute that they want, they add to the cart, and then they go to the payment page. There is like a very good conversion funnel killer. And then when people reach the payment page, the intent of purchase is very high. So you really want to make sure that once they reach at the level, the transaction goes through. So to answer the first part of your question, this is extremely important because we know also from some of the research that we have done, very data driven. So I'll try to share some numbers. So 21% of the people actually we interviewed that they say they would not go back to a website where there was a payment friction. And for them, payment friction is transaction decline. Why transaction decline? For people that in the payment industry, you probably know there's like billions of different error codes. Can be like insufficient funds, and obviously maybe you can offer different payment methods. Can be like the card was not able for e-commerce transaction. Can be authentication of with CDS. So long story short, you want to make sure that people actually really complete the transaction. And the other thing which is important, which I think also Sarah mentioned quite well earlier, is also the relevance that you want to show to your consumers. 24% of the consumers they leave the checkout page if their preferred payment method was not offered on the website. And if you're in Saudi and you don't have MENA, there is high chance that your conversion will drop. If you're selling in Kuwait, you don't have Canada, same story. As we also know this specifically for the retail, because I know there's a lot of retailers in the room. They buy now pay later, place like you wrote there. Digital wallet from Apple Pay, Google Pay, they also are very important, not only for conversion, but to remove the people there. So essentially, it's also important to offer the relevant payment solution to the audience that you have and to the countries where you are operating. And then you were asking about how we see the market evolving. Checkout has been in the region for like 12 years now, actually. So it's been, we know the region very well. We're a global player. We're obviously everywhere in the world. We have 19 offices. And I like about message earlier. They were very ambitious about the 2 years shopping license. We were the first payment company to get a shopping license from the CBOE, and it took 5 years to do that. So we were the first one. So essentially, you need to be very patient. And I think the leadership of this country also granted this exceptional reward for us because we really have been focusing the UAE for a long time. And obviously, it's very important in the ability of your customers and doing that at processing and all the other things a lot of people in this room, I guess they really know. But what I'm saying, the market has been evolving quite a lot. And it's interesting because when I moved to the region and we were discussing with some players about digital payments, I actually remember a conversation I had like in April 2018, so almost nearly 8 years ago, with one of the largest food platforms in the region. And the discussion was not about why they should use checkout.com. The discussion is why should they enable online payments? Because people order food, they sell like cash, the driver is the food, they get the cash. So now the same food platform that works with checkout, I can tell you the cash and delivery is like 1 digit. So it's always in existence. Of course, the relative payment methods also evolved quite a bit. We enabled Tabin Tamar back in the days. We were the first one to do it. It was nearly 2% of the payment page. Now, for some retailers, it's significant, actually scary significant, I would say. So the market definitely evolved. And because we're a global company, maybe another thing I can offer is that we see that when things change in MENA, specifically in the GCC, they change much quicker than other parts of the world. So I guess also is a testament that innovation and embracing new technology, new payment methods is much quicker than we see in many other parts of the world.
Amazing. I think great perspective. So most companies in the region are struggling for one of three KPIs, right? So there's growth, there's efficiency, and there's innovation. If you had to bucket payments as a methodology, what do you think can they impact, and what is the fastest they can impact?
Growth in efficiency and innovation. That's interesting because if you look at it, actually payments to some extent touch pretty much all of them. So if you don't have the strong payment platform, and it's not about the payment, it's really about the overall payment experience, which includes how will people do the checkout, do you offer tokenization, do you allow to do MAT transaction, CAT transaction, all of these things. And the relevant payment methods that we discussed, fraud also, Sarah mentioned, is a very good point. Basically, when you expand a new market, because you go to a new market, you don't really know the behavior of the consumers, and we know consumers don't really behave in the same way. That's also relevant. So you need to make sure you have something which is scalable. And I know that specifically during campaigns, during Ramadan or Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and a lot of our merchants, they are afraid to actually contact us with, hey, I had a downtime with my gateway, there was latency. So our job, we're very focused on performance because we want to make sure the merchant can grow, and we should be able to run like 500 transactions per second, like we managed to do in the recent peak season in November 2025. Otherwise, you want people to grow from that point of view. And then the second point I mentioned is innovation. The third point on innovation. This is extremely relevant because you want to keep innovating. If you look at some of the people in the room have been using checkout for a long time, and our gateway, our dashboard 8 years ago, and now it's like day and night. We obviously constantly improve, constantly release new features. We work on a lot of AI, especially when it comes to fraud. We have a lot of, we process billions of transactions, some of the largest players in the world, not only in the region. So we need to adopt a very well because fraudsters, they actually innovate much faster sometimes than retailers. And payment gateways, so you need to obviously be very always on top of it. Yeah. And the other thing which I think is very relevant is to make sure that you always use whatever is new. Can be the new payment method, it can be Google Pay opening up as an example, or can be buy now pay later, like a more disruptive approach, which is actually very relevant. We also know, for example, that in the region, when it comes to innovation specifically, a lot of retailers sometimes, in my opinion, underestimate the power of tokenization because the schemes they offer network tokens, which I think helps quite a lot to boost conversion. We also launched last year a pretty cool product which is called Remember Me, which essentially allows tokenization not only on the merchant level but across all the checkout network. So for the sake of the argument, you go on a pet shop and they use checkout, you set the card there, and then you go onward and they use checkout and the card is already set there. So improve much quicker the conversion, and most importantly, also you reduce the charge of frauds because I really know the consumer behavior. And this innovation they keep up all the time. What's the last point you mentioned? So grow innovation and efficiency. That's a good one because obviously you want to balance cost versus the return, I would say, which the famous ROI approach. So I will be very brief here. So we at checkout wherever it goes on performance. So everything you do is performance data. You go on our website, the word performance is written as soon as you open it. Because it's really important for us to improve the acceptance rate, to boost the performance. Because if I enable you to recover one additional customer, then I can justify the level of service and the additional 1 cent per transaction, whatever it is that we will recover. So that's the efficiency piece. Because having something which is cheap, can be the delivery in the warehouse. And we were talking about like the quick delivery earlier, or versus something super efficient but expensive won't work. So finding the right balance, of course, is really relevant, and that's what we do all day long. We're really obsessed, obviously, about performance, specifically ourselves in payments. But I guess it applies in logistics, I guess it applies in the way how you do the warehouse, and the last part, delivery.
Amazing. I think you touched upon fraud a couple of times, but I think in the larger perspective of compliance and then fraud being part of it, right? How much do you kind of are being paranoid about compliance and fraud, and how do you kind of manage, and how do merchants see the value of what you're doing? Because all of this is mostly a post-mortem, right? When after fraud happens, what happens? But how do you kind of prevent this entire thing? So
we're not paranoid for sure, but obviously we take this very seriously, and our fraud risk department actually is becoming bigger and bigger because we want to make sure that we scale the right pace, but at the same time we keep an eye on the new innovation in fraud, if I can call it this word. But for us, it's really about, obviously, we go back about the data point. We process billions of transactions. We have a lot of data. I mean, we tokenize like 98% of the cars in the UAE. So pretty much we have everyone. We are like 96% of the cars tokenized in Saudi. So we have a lot of data, which means we know pretty much when there is a friendly chargebacks, hey, you don't like the quality of the shoes that you received and you want to return, versus actually I stole your credit card and I managed to fund the transaction, I passed the transaction without you being able to authenticate. At the same time, and you also have a question about compliance. Since we became regulated, our merchants love it because they get better service, cheaper. We remove third party in the middle. But I'm not gonna lie, I'm spending significant amount of time on the compliance piece because schemes, central banks, other regulators, they actually demand you to obviously they put a lot of pressure, which I think is fair. So it's something that we completely don't underestimate, and actually we hiring quite a lot in checkout. Many roles are commercial, but actually we also invest a lot in operations. And for operation, I look at I'm referring about risk, fraud, and compliance. Just to conclude, this part for us is also relevant to make sure that we get merchants feedback. We launched a new fraud tool like 6 months ago called Fraud Detection Pro, which is based on rule based. So give the flexibility to merchants to do what they want. Because to be honest with you, if you're only selling in the UAE and you've been in the UAE for a long time, your fraud requirements are less strict than if you're expanding to Malaysia. Actually, a merchant on the way coming here was telling me that fraud attack from Malaysia, which is a market where they want to focus on, but they don't have much expertise, and they need somebody who has local knowledge and understanding of how the local market operates.
Great. I think you've seen this evolve from cash on delivery being 90% to now being sub 1%, right? How do you see the next 5 years now? What's the big thing that's going to come as innovation in the payment space?
Interesting question. Definitely, we as a payment company, we need to be super agile. We need to adapt to any change is happening, and it's very hard for us to predict what's the next thing. But I think if we look at the past data, we look at the current behaviors, a couple of things are very clear. One is digital payments will continue to grow. Since 2020, which we're running this yearly digital report to last year, and we're going to publish in 2 months or so the new report, 139% growth of consumer shopping online at least once per day. So that's an incredible amount. And I'm mentioning from 2020 to now because a lot of people saying, hey, COVID has accelerated the growth of e-commerce. Not really. Maybe they pushed a bit something which is already going, because even post-COVID, we've been seeing amazing numbers. So number two, I will say the digital payments will continue to grow. I think it's going to be way more digital, and I also believe it's going to be more and more tokenization. The Remember Me that I was talking about, the network tokens from Visa, Mastercard. I think you will see more and more of that. And the other thing which I think is going to be very interesting, which we already we've been working quite a lot in checkout, is the role of agentic commerce when people shop using a local agent. There is a lot of open questions on this when it comes to liability chargeback. We talk about fraud. Who's going to be responsible for a chargeback if there's a transaction on agentic commerce, like as basic as this. But we definitely think in the next 5 years it's going to be additional challenge. I mean, if you just do a bit of a step back, we first had like e-commerce, and people were shopping on the website. Then we had mobile commerce. Everybody started to use the mobile phone, and then you start to literally shop everywhere. And then we had a lot of focus on social commerce because a lot of people buy on any digital social platform. And now you obviously have agentic commerce. I think it's going to be just an additional channel where people will purchase, and it's definitely one of the things that we were pretty confident we will see. Last but not least, people, we are in a very serious business in payments because we cannot screw up with people money. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
So you want to make sure, as a retailer, as a merchant, you want to make sure that you get paid as quick as you can, efficiently. So obviously balancing the payment costs, making sure that there are less declined transactions. But also you want to make sure that you as a merchant receive the money very quickly. I'm still hearing people get set at T+5, T+7. Visa, Mastercard's a nightmare for doing reconciliation. They set the T+1 if it's domestic AD, T+3 if it's domestic non-AD. Then if it's USD but non-USD dominated credit card, they set a T+4. It's a nightmare. So I think also I will see in the next 5 years more innovation on the B2B payment side. One thing we're pushing quite a lot, based on some of the events we see the merchants, is like payments with the virtual cards. So a lot of merchants start to use virtual card to pay their suppliers. And definitely in the next 5 years, you'll see less bank transfer and more digital payments also on that side. A lot of travel agencies already do this quite a lot. So if you book a ticket on, I don't know, on Wigo, Almosaffer, or one of the local platforms, they tend to pay their suppliers like airlines or attractions by cards. So it's there to the reconciliation, it's there to reduce chargebacks, and obviously the inefficiency of the bank transfers, especially on the weekends. And what I'm going with this, that we would love to make the payout on B2B also instant. And I think the usage of stable coins will help us in the next 5 years to do that.
Oh, exciting times. That was a Ferrari driver looking at the world outside. This takes so much time, that takes so much time, right? So you spoke about agentic commerce, right? And now I find you're at the frontier of building some of those solutions. I think, how do you see payments progressing in a space where humans may not necessarily be shopping, but the shopping would be done by an agent? And within that, you touched upon a bit on the fraud side of things, but how are you going to see this progression where I have given an agent access to my shopping and it's just doing it for me?
Well, the agent is to be instructed by a human still. So I think the intention shouldn't really change. Unless you want my agent to say, well, I want to go for eat, and then specify my parameters. I want to take a flight within 5 hours, and I want to sleep in that kind of hotel. I still need to give some instructions, So I think the human component will not disappear. But I think will make the life much easier, specifically going to search and compare. So using the example of, hey, I want to buy that, specific headsets, but only that model and only when the price is less than 800 euro. So I mean, that agent will help you quite a bit. But then there is a lot of open questions. We're working very closely with Visa and Mastercard. We work with OpenAI, with Google, all the other big protocols about, again, as I mentioned earlier, who authenticates the transaction? Is the agent? But then I, as a consumer, I need to make sure that I authorize that agent. And who does the KYC of the agent? Are we going to trust all the agents out there? And if the agent made a mistake, he bought instead of 800 dirham, 8,000 dirham, or maybe he screw up the brand, who's going to be in charge of the chargeback? Who takes the liability there? The agent? The merchant? I don't think you as a merchant, you want to do that. The payment gateway, we will essentially we follow an instruction based on an API request. you will make, or the agent will make, or the consumer, essentially. So there's a lot of open questions there. And as I said, there is a lot of, the ecosystem is not ready. A lot of people are working towards that. But I'm pretty confident that we will see more volume through that. Although I personally don't think that will dramatically change. I think we will still decide where we're going to go on holidays. We will get an agent to recommend us the best outfit for the retail remix event on Dharmendra Mehta, based on the audience, based on the people that are there. But I think it will just be an additional channel which will have a decent growth.
Amazing. So, Remo and I did a podcast some months ago. My questions are still the same, but the answers are completely changed. So, that's the pace at which innovation is happening, and really delighted. I think that's about the question.